My name is Matthew Rappold, and this is Local Music Live on Midtown Radio, KW, the home of Kitchener-Waterloo music. Now, as our guests for tonight's program, we have two members of the indie rock band Adult Recreation Center here in our studio. For those who haven't heard of them, Adult Recreation Center is an amazing band that's been releasing quality music for the past couple of years here locally, and they're in the middle of a super exciting project that's relevant for this particular show, Local Music Live. More on that later, but first, let's welcome them to the show. Sandy and Dan, welcome to Local Music Live.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Now, first things first, we're all about the hard-hitting journalism here on Local Music Live. So I want to get your thoughts. Are you pro November Snow or anti-November Snow?
I am so far anti.
Really? Give me the rationale. Walk me through your thought process.
It's too early. I think snow should exist 2 weeks before Christmas to New Year's, and then let's get rid of it. Let's bring back the sun.
You're not all about the Christmas spirit in November?
I don't know. Okay, so honestly, though, I did set up my Christmas tree last night. I not only set it up, but me and my partner went to a thrift store. We got the tree. We set it up. And I woke up this morning and I walked out of my room and I saw the Christmas tree, and I did do like a big, like Grinch 4 times heart big smile where I was like, so nice. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe I am pro November Snow. Who knows?
Okay, thanks, Dan. Sandy, what are you thinking?
I'm also anti-November Snow, and also setting up a Christmas tree on November? You have to wait till December.
That's not true.
That's my take.
I do agree with Sandy on that one. December 1st,
exactly.
That's when it starts.
I do have a question, though. I don't want to make this go off the rails immediately.
No, let's do it.
But is American Thanksgiving this late every single year? Because I've been like kind of holding off in my head. I was like, Christmas can come after American Thanksgiving.
Yeah. But
it feels like it's so late. I've been holding off so long. I'm like, I just want that Christmas spirit.
Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, it's that late every year.
Yeah. Wow. You learned something new.
Exactly. We're all about that hard-hitting journalism here. We're about spreading the facts.
Education, it's really important.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us here. And before we get into sort of our bigger discussion about music and stuff, why don't we go around and you can introduce yourselves to the listeners and you can share a little bit about what you do in Adult Recreation Center.
Awesome. I'm Sandy. I play guitar and keys and write a lot of the songs.
Yeah, and my name is Dan, and I play drums in the band. And we've just been cooking up a new album and working away.
Yes, and before we get to that new album, because I want to tease this out a little bit. Tell the listeners what to expect with Adult Recreation Center. How would you describe your band, your genre, your sound, your overall vibe?
Yeah, that's the worst question to ask any musician, I feel.
I know, that's why I have to ask that.
It's a tough one.
It's the hardest. I don't know. Alex calls us our bassist calls us hipster indie rock a lot, which I don't necessarily agree with. But
that would be the most hipster thing to say, right?
Yeah,
that's
very accurate. Maybe he's reading into me more than I think he is.
But I think that's a fair description. I don't know. It's it reminds me, at least our first album that we worked on reminded me a lot of music that we would have grown up listening to in Canada in
2010, 2008.
Yeah, and I think that influence has carried over to our new stuff, but I don't know.
It's riffing on that kind of alt rock and mainstream rock that was really popular before Lady Gaga invented electropop.
Yeah, of
before
course.
She invented good music.
Yeah, before she changed, before she made things right.
So that's so interesting because that's when I was listening to your first album, Artifacts. That's the vibe I was getting, and I was connecting with it so much.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of a lot of the stuff that I was listening to, like you said before. Just Dance came out by Lady Gaga, which was my sort of grade 11, grade 12.
AJD.
Yeah.
Before Just Dance. That's how we separate. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's a great sort of segue into it. That's probably why I gravitated so much to the album. But I wanted to ask you, about that album Artifacts. It's an absolute gem of a record. What does it feel like to have an album out for, about a year and a half now?
I forget.
You forget that it's out?
I genuinely forget it's out, and then I'll like come home occasionally to where my parents live, and then they'll be playing it. I'll be like, oh yeah, we did that.
Aww.
It's really sweet, but I also
so
forget
nice.
it exists until they play it.
It feels good. Honestly, so this was like the first album that we put out together, and it was at a weird time when we made it because it was kind of like right at the beginning of the pandemic, I think. Mm-hmm. And Yeah, so it's like, I mean, it's called Artifacts, but it's also like a weird artifact of that time, and like it's something that I think about every now and again, or a song will pop up because I have it saved on my Spotify and be like, oh yeah, this is great. But it's also funny when you release music like that because you're so invested in it and you think about it for so long, and then you put it out there and you're like, great, and your mind just immediately is kind of like moving on.
Yeah, of course.
Which is weird in a certain way, but yeah.
I mean, it is strange. I mean, like there's not a whole lot of other, I think, like professions where you spend so much time, years working collaboratively with people, and then you get this together, and it's really a collection. It's not even just the band, it's like the producer, the engineer, the mixer, the masterer, those people who are working on the album, and then it gets released and you're like, cool. What's next, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's an interesting situation to be in as musicians.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the things that has come up a lot, because we're working with the same producers, this record on Canadian Daydream, and they went, wait, that was 2 years ago? They freak out every time they realize how long it had been since we'd seen each other. So it's like very strange to think about like how much we've changed and how much like we've grown, but also like I also listen to it. I'm like, oh yeah, we're good. That was good. I was proud of that.
It's a great album. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you said that you listen to it when you're at, your parents' place.
Yeah.
Do you listen to your own music like regularly?
No. I try and stay away. I mean, there's certain songs that I will enjoy if people put it on, I suppose. But I get such like, even though I'm very proud of it and it's like a labor of love and I really love what we did, I feel like you can't help but get like a little secondhand embarrassment where you're like, oh, like, okay, you're playing my thing.
Absolutely.
It's very nice, but.
Yeah. Anytime I hear someone, like when my parents do it, it's like, oh, this is sweet. But anytime I've like walked in on like a friend like going over to the house and they're listening to it for the first time, I immediately like go, nope, I need to leave. This is so weird that you're like listening to something that has me in it.
Also, friendships are weird because like they'll put it on genuinely as a nice thing, but you're like, when are you gonna start making fun of me? Like this is a little 100%. Too sensitive. This is the art we made, and I don't know when the razzing will begin.
Yeah. So our band I the Mountain was on tour out on the East Coast, and we were at this house. We're staying at this house party. They invited us to stay, and they were having this big party. And then it was about like 11:30 when they put on our first song.
Okay.
Oh,
and then it was like 11:45 when I realized they had just put on like our entire discography.
Amazing.
And the house had speakers in every room, like one of those built-in speakers, including the bathroom.
No.
So I'm like, you literally can't escape I the Mountain in this house. Like it's a bit of like, I mean, super touched, obviously. It's such a kind thing. It was so nice for them to do. But it's like, it's a bit like a horror movie, right?
Yeah,
where it's like,
it's a little bit like a psyop. Like we're going to make you an I the Mountain fan by the end of tonight.
You know what? If that's what we got to do, then.
If it works, it works.
Yeah. Anyway, so thanks so much for sharing a little bit about that. We're going to go to a song break, and I want to give the listeners a little taste of your sort of 2010 what would you call it?
BJD, before Just Dance.
The before Just Dance era of your sound. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what track you've chosen as the entry point into Adult Recreation Center?
We picked Without You, which is I think the third track on the last album, and it is a sort of like acoustic driven, but then it sort of evolves into this sort of like bigger, more guitar heavy. That's a lot of our songs go from like smaller to something that's bigger at the end, and it's sort of probably one of our more laid back songs, honestly.
I think so. There's some cool time signature switches at the end, which I think is very cool. I remember us writing this in my parents' basement way back in the day.
So long
and
ago.
When we came up with that, because Sandy knows music theory really well, and I would say I don't. And he was like, well, if we just make it this tempo, we can switch between like 4/4 and 3/4 and this way. I was like, oh my God, this guy's on another level. And so that's why I like the song.
Awesome. Well, let's hear the song Without You by our guests, Adult Recreation Center, here on Local Music Live.
Away. There's rooftops in the city that remind that means? It's hopeless, and I'm hopeless without you. Can't see past the doubt through the clouds of my mind. It's hopeless, year is too long, and I can't just write songs till your hands in mine. I'm so scared of the future, scars and the sutures stitch up my heart broken too. For the sake of my still breathing lungs, left alone is not fun without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. The Parkside condo doesn't feel the same. In autumn, you aren't there to say my name. Smile, I can't hold you in my arms at night. This much space in bed, it doesn't feel right. It feels like it's not come to pass. The past comes on too fast. How will I ever last? I just can't stop chasing dreams. I guess that means it's hopeless, and I'm hopeless without you. Can't see past the doubt through the clouds in my mind. It's hopeless, year is too long, and I can't just write songs till your hands in mine. I'm so scared of the future, scars and the sutures stitch up my heart broken too. For the sake of my still breathing lungs, life alone is not fun without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. Someday you'll come back to me. Someday all will be right. Someday we won't be away. I just wish that we're tonight. I wish that we're tonight. It's hopeless, and I'm hopeless without you. Can't see past the doubt through the clouds in my mind. It's hopeless, the year is too long, and I can't just write songs till your hands in mine. I'm so scared of the future, the scars and the sutures stitch up my heart broken too. For the sake of my still breathing lungs, life alone is not fun without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do without you. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Welcome back to Local Music Live here on Midtown Radio KW. You just heard Without You by my guests, Adult Recreation Center. Okay, so I teased your new project in the last segment. Let's get into the meat and potatoes now. I've been wanting to chat with you guys ever since I saw that you were awarded a Region of Waterloo Arts Fund grant for this project, and I think this is like one of the coolest things going on in the region right now. So, Sandy and Dan, can you give like a 30-second grant synopsis, a grant teaser of this project?
We're writing a record called, I think we're definitely calling it Driftwood. Yeah, we're definitely calling it.
Hold on.
Big announcement here.
Yeah,
Big announcement.
are we breaking news right now?
Yeah.
Breaking
Get
news.
the ticker going.
Yeah, get the ticker. We're releasing an album called Driftwood, which is named after one of the streets that we kind of grew up near. And it's a whole sort of record about the experience of kind of like growing up in Kitchener specifically and like KW generally, and kind of like coming back to that. And when you're an adult and going, things have changed. Is it me or is it the place? Is it both of us? And sort of like trying to reconcile those like strange emotions. And that's sort of the whole arc of the record.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. I mean, it's such a cool idea to have a concept album about this place. And I think it's going to be so valuable for the music scene to kind of like reflect itself back in the mirror, I guess, if that's the appropriate way of phrasing that. Tell me about the idea. Where did you come up with the concept for this album? And as a band of, more than just two people, it's how many people in the band?
5.
There's 5 of us.
5. I mean, I know it's hard sometimes to come up with like even song ideas that you all agree with, like how, like as a band, right? So how like hard was it to come up with a decision to do a concept album about this particular idea?
Not as hard as you'd think. It's one of those things where it's like me and the other guitarists usually bring songs to the band, and we sort of go from there. And those were the only songs I'd been writing for the last little while. So it was sort of like I'd had this idea in my head, like walking around my neighborhood going, it would be cool to like actually reflect on that and think about it. And doing that, I was kind of like, when I started doing that, I was like, well, this is all I have. So this is I started pitching it to them and going, well, this is kind of where I want us to go for the next thing. And Graham had a bunch of songs that were really aligning with those themes as well. And it was like, okay, let's put those together and see where it comes out. And then Dan is the one who actually sat down for an intensive thing and actually wrote the grant and got us the funding, and he nailed it.
Yeah.
Kudos to Dan. That is a Herculean task sometimes, grant writing. So
It can be. I'll tell you what, Sandy had told me about the grant, and he said, I'm going to write this grant. And then he texted me the morning the grant was due, and he said, I actually don't have time. I'm not going to apply to this grant. I went, you're crazy. I'll do it. And then you look at that. A year later, we're making an album.
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a motivational story.
We'd
Just
apply
go
for
there and
other
do it.
grants.
So the motivation is leave everything to the last
Absolutely,
minute.
yeah.
Text your
Last
friend and get your
Yeah.
friend to do it.
I
Completely
guess so.
underestimate how much work you're doing, and then your drummer will do it.
Always leaving things to the drummers, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I play drums too,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth?
Sandy, I want to talk to you a little bit about the songwriting aspect of it, because I mean, you mentioned that you've been writing songs kind of about these themes, but let's think about the songwriting process as it relates to your previous stuff too. Was it different to sort of write about a specific place or a specific idea, like intentionally? How did that writing process compare to your previous work with Artifacts?
Yeah, place has always kind of been an important thing. If you listen to the first record, there's a lot of, as Rob keeps joking, directions to get to places that we know. And that sort of tracks with this record. So it was sort of like evolving stuff that I was already thinking about. But it was weird to sort of like then have like a huge amount of songs all about kind of the same thing and trying to parse through them, even like before I brought them to the band, and go like, okay, which ones are actually like good and which ones are just like me having a moment, and then like trying to find into that. And a lot of what I was trying to do when I was bringing songs was not bring like full ideas, like have the like lyrics written generally in the choruses, but have a lot of play. And I know Yumi and our lead singer Ross spent a lot of practices sort of just like hashing stuff out and trying to rework stuff. And there were like choruses changed just from raw kind of like improvising to me doing a chord progression, and they sort of like evolved through that process, and that was definitely different. A lot of it was like that sort of collaboration from like a much smaller seed was new for us.
Cool. So that's a little bit different than what you had on the previous. Was it on the previous album, the songs were more fully formed when they came to the group?
It's interesting. It was like collaborative in a different way.
Yeah.
I found on the first album, we wrote a lot of the songs together, but in a way that was like, we're just jamming and we're coming up with ideas, and Sandy has some lyrics and we're like building this together. Whereas, I mean, a lot of that did happen on this new record, but it was a lot more like conceptually jamming, where we're like, Sandy has some lyrics and maybe a little ditty to go off of.
A little
And
ditty.
so
Thanks.
then we'll just be like, well, what about this? Or what does this really mean? Or let's probe deeper into this like concept. And then the song kind of forms from there. And maybe that's also because we knew coming out of the first album, we're like, okay, well, we can come up with the actual songwriting, but let's like really dive into what are we trying to say here and how are we saying it.
Yeah.
Cool. And so, I mean, lyrically speaking, for this new album, I mean, the title of the album itself, Driftwood, is a bit of a name drop, right?
Yeah.
Is that something that sort of permeates through the rest of the lyrics in the song, or is it maybe a little bit more thematic? You mentioned Artifacts being sort of directions to places. Is that something that carries on through this album, or is it more explicit?
Yes and no.
Okay.
That's the best answer.
You got to explain that one.
No,
You can't say yes and no.
There's more songs on this record, so there's a little more diversity in that sense. There's definitely a lot of sense of place, because the record's about that, and it's also important for like what I do is like when I'm writing lyrics. And there's definitely those specific things, but it's also trying to like take a little bit. Some songs are sort of trying to take a step back at that and be a little more general in like the way they conjure imagery, and that was also sort of intentional for me, because sometimes I was like leaning a little too hard on like just telling you how to drive to North Bay during the bridge of a song, which I was like, maybe that doesn't apply to this one. So there was sort of like this kind of like conscious trying to like deepen the way that I approach that instead of just kind of hitting it at the surface level of like, oh, this is where I am, but like trying to look at why am I talking about this specific place and why is it important and how does that resonate outside of people who like don't live in KW and don't know where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a bit of a struggle, right? If you make an album about a place, are those songs going to be able to resonate with people who don't have familiarity with that particular place? Is that something you guys have talked about in the band?
No. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah,
That's
let's
a
do it
great
now.
worry now.
Let's hash it out right here on Local Music Live.
But I don't know. I think there's a universal kind of aspect to the album. I think everybody, I think while the lyrics can be pretty observational and specific, I think in a really wonderful way, I think the universal theme of just like coming from a place and not knowing your place once you kind of grow up, I think that speaks to, I think, everybody. Yeah. I think there's like kind of it's called Driftwood, but there's like a driftlessness to kind of coming back to your city, especially like, because this was also written still like kind of mid-pandemic. Yeah. So it's like, okay, where am I and what's my place in here and how am I processing all of this stuff that kind of came before? I don't know. So I hope it's universal. If not, you can say I told you so.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying anything. I'm just posing the questions here, right? Yeah. I'm just the interviewer.
Of course.
Well, I'm so excited to hear this project, and I mean, you got to tell us whereabouts you're at in the process of making this record. You have a name for it. You're working with Canadian Daydream. What are you sort of mid-recording? Have you got sort of things kind of more or less recorded?
We're mixing.
Yeah.
Ooh, we're in the studio
really
mixing.
Amazing.
It's so exciting to hear it all come together because like you write it and you're like in your head, you're like, this, I can hear how it's going to sound. It's going to sound great. And then you record it and you're really happy with it, but you play it back and it's not mixed and it's all just kind of like random layers. And you're like, whoa, okay, let's see how this comes together. And then the wonderful producers do their magic and mix it. And it sounds like a real song. So I'm very excited. Yeah. We have 2 more to mix, I think, right?
Yeah, we have 2 more. And like, going back and like checking old ones, but it's basically, we have like, we're very close.
I have a couple more questions here. And I mean, there's so many questions I have about this because I haven't even got into the recording of the album and what that's like being in the studio. But, you're working with Canadian Daydream and like massive shout out to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a great production company. They do like live sound they work with Sherwood, I think, to do live sound. And they also do recording and mixing and full song production. What has it been like to be in the studio with Canadian Daydream? And like, how involved are they in the actual sort of ideation and like writing and arrangement piece?
They're wonderful guys. It's so nice to work with them, and coming back the second time and both of us, the group, each sort of organization having like sort of evaluated each other and like gotten to know and become friends and sort of become better at working together has been a wonderful thing, and it's made it so much easier now that we're doing more songs. And but they're definitely a part of that process in kind of like an intense way. They're always giving us suggestions. We don't take every suggestion, obviously, but we try a lot of them because it's always they have a really good innate understanding of like what we're doing. So most of what they give us is like, hey, this is going to make it better, and they're really good at that.
Can I ask you just a little side follow-up?
Yeah.
Can you share one suggestion that they advanced and that you didn't take?
I feel like you would have a better answer to this. All I can think is song structure, because as a drummer, I'm usually in there first. And so we're hashing out like, okay, can we cut this out? I mean, those are the most fun days to me because I'm also like an editor. Yep. So I'm like, okay, let's just like, can we cut out this chorus and streamline this and do this stuff? And it feels a little sacrilegious to like Sandy and Graham who are writing the songs, but it's very fun. So there's lots of ideas there where it's like, do we actually need this? Or like, what if we did like double time here instead of how we've been thinking about it? So like, those are the things that we love moving forward with. I don't know if you have a specific example of something we dropped.
But on that, I do. But on that note, I do really love not being there for that because I'm never there for that stuff. And I'm just like, I'm just going to let them do it. And then I'll hear what they did. And then it'll have changed and I'll just deal with it. And usually it's like, it always ends up actually sounding much nicer. Like there's New Romantics on the first record, you jacked up to be faster.
True. Yeah.
Which was wild to suddenly have to play it faster. But those kind of things. There's been a couple things in mixing probably that we've done where they're like, we're going to try this sort of radical idea. And we sit there and we're like, that's wonderful. Please get rid of that.
But that's always like so amazing that you can have that relationship where they feel comfortable enough with you to advance that. And you really want to have that as a musician in the mixing process. Like, I want to have a producer that's like let's try this. I
Yeah.
think that this is going to sound amazing. And then you also want to have the relationship where you can be like, wow, great idea. Not for us right now. I appreciate that. And like, you
exactly.
want to feel comfortable enough to say that. So like, it sounds like you have a fantastic relationship with those, with Canadian Daydream.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they have so many great ideas, and they also like know all the stuff that's on their computer. So they're like, what if we tried these like cool ways of manipulating audio? And we can always pull back if it's too much. But like having people who are willing to just be like, yeah, let's try this. Like,
Yeah.
it's good.
We had one song that we did where the producers we were working with, they were like, you know what this track really needs? Bongos. And they brought out the bongos, and there is bongos on one of our first EPs because they were like, it really needs bongos.
Bongos. Maybe we'll take that into whatever third thing we do.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
be like, we'll have to keep bongos.
It's
in
not
there.
a real record if it doesn't have bongos,
True.
which
Amen.
means that 2 of our records aren't real records, I guess. Let's talk a little bit about the local music scene here in KW, because we're so lucky to have such a talented music scene and such an incredible music scene. And it's like, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this show, is because we want to just like put that music out and like amplify it as much as possible. Why do you think that we have such an amazing scene? What is the reason that Kitchener-Waterloo has that? Do you have any ideas?
I think the thing that always strikes me about like leaving this city is the fact that we really do have an insanely good music scene for like the size and like the demographic. It's helpful. I think part of that is like having a bunch of like admittedly like university students here, like to really make it a place that people want to come to, but also have like tons of new ideas coming through. I went to Laurier in their music program doing like my undergrad and like grad school, and even from there, the amount of people that I know, like we've talked about that we just know is like that are connections all come from that sort of like circle and the sort of extensions of those, and that creativity is sort of like always swirling kind of constantly, and I think that's part of it for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had never really thought about it, but I think all the students, because we have so many students here, we have like a much bigger venue scene and like more nightlife scene than we probably deserve without all of that in KW. And because of that, there's all these spaces that kind of allow bands to also like come up and prosper there. So yeah, maybe it's that.
Yeah, I think there's also a legacy thing. There's a lot of like places that like young people can like do music for free, and also like supported places like the Beckett School or like other music schools, Renaissance School of the Arts, those kind of places. And I know there's also like, we had a really great high school music program, and that a lot of schools here have a really great high school music program. And I think all of that contributes to sort of like a culture of like appreciating music and creativity.
Totally.
I mean, it also helps that Waterloo funds music.
Yeah,
we got a sum of money to help produce this album, which we probably wouldn't have been able to do at the scope of this album, without it. So it's nice that there's money also here for it.
Yeah, let's say shout out to everybody in Waterloo region who is supporting our local music scene and working to make it a pretty incredible place. We're very, very lucky to have it, and let's make sure we keep it growing.
Yeah.
So before you were here, I asked you to pick out a song that you thought that our listeners should hear from a local artist. Can you tell us about what that song is?
It is Jockeyville Bourbon by Homer Watson Boulevard. It's a Tom Waits cover. Homer Watson Boulevard is the band that our producers, Mitch and Steph from Canadian Daydream, and their other business partner, Jack, all play in, along with a violinist. And they sort of like, this is a song they put out. It's very different than the Tom Waits version, which is very cool to hear the contrast. They played theirs and then they played the contrast. And I was sort of like, oh, how did you get there? And it's a really cool, it's also one I've been listening to a lot, and also like we love those guys and we just want to like share the fact. And I think they're looking at like trying to get more of their own music out there soon. Nice. So they're like, I wanted to bring them to
also another band named after a very hyper specific thing in the region. So
even more specific than ours.
Maybe even more specific than ours, if you can imagine.
Awesome. Well, let's get to that track.
And a million and a drop dead suit, Dutch pink on a downtown train, $2 pistol, but the gun won't shoot.
My name is Matt Rappold, and thanks so much for tuning in this Tuesday evening to Local Music Live. Up next, we have the dreaded Local Music Live lightning round. Beep, 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 beep. Bum, bum, bum. And one of these days, we're going to get like a sound effects board
Oh,
so
yeah.
we can do
It's like one of those,
real
like-
sound effects. And the rules of the lightning round are as follows. I have a stack of KW-related questions, and you
Okay.
have 2 minutes to answer as many questions as you possibly can. And I believe producer Allison was the last record 8 questions from Housecat. Could have been 12. Let's say the
12?
record's 12. We
Okay.
don't actually keep score.
I don't
but
think we're going to beat House
Let's
Cat.
see if you can beat Housecat
Okay.
with 12. So,
Great.
are you ready? Can I get someone to have a little stopwatch here for 2 minutes? Here we go. First question. Go. What's your favorite cafe in KW?
It's a great question. I'm going to say Settlement.
Also Settlement.
Nice.
Underrated restaurant in Kitchener-Waterloo.
La Guanaquita, I forget. Is that what it's
Yes,
called? But I mean, is it
yes.
underrated? It's so good.
It is so good. Okay. Farmers markets. St. Jacobs or Kitchener?
Kitchener.
Walking distance. Come
Oh,
on.
yeah.
I like how you both said that in unison.
Yeah, well, high school.
If you could make a music video anywhere in Kitchener-Waterloo, where would you make it?
On the parking garage that they kicked me out of a little bit ago. So
Yeah.
I want to actually get a permit and go there then.
Yeah.
Joke's on them.
I was there. That was fun.
Strangest thing about KW?
How the streets don't go in the direction they say they're going.
It was called Berlin.
Okay, great. Both good ones. I like the streets one, especially because I live on a street that the same road has 5 different names if you keep following it. You can only support one team, Kitchener Rangers or the Kitchener Titans.
Kitchener Rangers.
Kitchener
I'm so
Titans.
sorry. I haven't heard of the Titans.
Titans is the
basketball
basketball team.
team.
Oh, never mind. I love them.
Finish the sentence. I wish that KW had.
Better transit.
And I'm a real IMAX theater.
Different priorities.
Finish the sentence. People mostly know KW for its tech industry, but it should be known for its.
Us.
It's us. I love it.
All right, I love that. I love it. If Otis and Ophelia, the swans who live in Victoria/Willow River Park, have another little signet, what do you think it should be called?
Oh, it's good.
I think a signet's a baby swan.
baby.
Oh, baby swan. Let's go baby swan. There's baby shark. Let's do
Okay, I
baby
love
swan.
it.
Baby swan,
Baby
baby
swan.
shark.
Do,
Good.
do, 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 do.
It's good. I like it.
Favorite place to play in Waterloo Region?
The hub.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going outside of KW now into Cambridge. Preston, Galt, or Hespeler?
Preston.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I realize
My-
I said that in a very sort of surprised
Yeah,
manner,
like
but I
that's mean to
genuinely-
Preston. How? Why? No, my grandpa
was-
used to live in Preston.
I
That's
was
my
Jenny's
reason.
genuinely
grandpa used to
curious.
live in Preston. That's
It's a
why.
great
That's why
spot.
for both of
Yeah.
us.
And that brings us to the end of our Local Music Live lightning round. A round of applause for Adult Recreation Center. Well
That was
done.
fun.
Yeah.
Well done.